what comic inspirations drove you?
I don't read comics.
Creating OCs or original characters is a global pastime on the internet. Though the longer you have them, the more attached you get, often with the creator eventually wanting to make a story with them. And while one can say that's an easy task, it becomes more difficult the longer you have them. Fearing that you might not let your OCs have the story they deserve, work is often left undone because of the anxiety of failure. Rebeltaxi has had his OCs for nearly 2 decades, and with 2 webcomic series and a pilot, can he make his idea work alone, or does he just need help to get it drawn together? Hello, I'm Daft Pina, and this is Rebeltaxi, Failed Webcomic. Wow, what a downer, nearly clickbaity title right there. But don't worry, it actually gets better at the end, but no skipping. Rebeltaxi, or Pan Pizza, is a 29-year-old artist and YouTuber from Texas, like me. Well, just the last 3 parts. Creating his channel back in 2008, he's known for reviewing cartoons and video games respectively. He even has a podcast, originally having Jim Gisriel, Izzy, and others, where he often interviews show creators in order to give an in-depth look on their processes. And while working on his cartoon reviews, Pan has been working on his own comic series, Loki IRL. As mentioned before that he is a reviewer, you must think about how fantastic his comic is. As surely as someone who reviews a thing, then they can replicate or make better than what they criticize. The critic trap is a phrase best articulated in a friend of mine's video, The Flaws of Internet Criticism, in which Ellis Mark describes a concept of critics trying to make their own works, while also having a backlog of videos bad-mouthing other projects, something he and I relate to with our respective cartoons. The main point he pushes is that critiquing and making are 2 different skill sets, but at the end of the day, if the critic tries to make something, then that's good. It means they can be humbled by the experience and work towards better critiques, makes them better projects for the future. But Pan is no stranger to creating art, as he graduated with a bachelor's degree in graphic design, and his channel being a good showcase for his style, making everything from the graphics themselves, and even the animations here and there. Apart from the bumpers, which are sometimes live action, and sometimes he commissions other people to make them, sometimes. His choice of aesthetic being a nice dark futuristic cityscape, as his character drives around a flying taxi. Speaking of which, let me change up my attire and lighting to better match that feeling. You like it? So leading to Pan's work and being a critic for over 13 years, let's dive into his first comic production, Loki IRL. The first recorded instance of Loki IRL is that of a 2012 post on his Tumblr page, in which you can see very early concepts and mini-comics starring the main characters. You have Bianca and her sister Wavebird, as well as the general family. I also mentioned these are the first online instances, as Pan actually had these OCs since about 2005 when he was in high school. Initially inspired by the show Bo. These characters originally had no names and were just that, a bunch of characters. In 2008, he tried to piece them together, trying to make a story with these mismatched OCs. He later evolved his art style after watching shows like Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, Clerks, and even Panty and Stocking. For game art style inspiration, he notes that WarioWare was a big influence. And between you and I, that's who I actually made an Ultimate, because he reminds me of Peter Griffin. And after watching an interview with Billy and Mandy creator Adam Maxwell Burton, he was inspired by this quote.
They say that any character you create is sort of based on an aspect of yourself.
Taking that quote to heart, he worked not only on the designs, but also the characters' personalities, taking inspiration from real life. And so, it wasn't until August 31st, 2015, where he would make a formal comic series of his OCs. In a world where art can come to life, Bianca wants her own cartoon, aiming to get accepted in art school in the future. And I say future as in the series, she's 14, so she has a bit of time to improve her art. Like, a lot of time. While attending a convention with Wavebird, they stumble across a book of Loki drawings from a lost pilot. And the premise of the series is actually inspired by the movie Last Action Hero, of all things, where a kid magically gets transported to the fictional movie, later bringing action hero Slater to the real world, thus following the antics of a fictional character realizing he doesn't have the movie magic to save him, much like Loki did when he got shot. As a way to hype up the comic's initial release, he opted to hand out samples in 2015 at Comic-Con. Ian Jones' Quarterly, creator of OKKO, is actually said to have one. Though Pan did say he spent quite the penny on the promotion, and he probably doesn't want to do it again anytime soon.
Oh my god, yeah, so I paid like $100 to print 20 of those. That was not very viable, and it's like, damn, those comics suck. Why would I give that out? I don't know.
But the main issue, get it cause comics are like in issue format, for me was the initial run that there was too many characters established way too early on. Though I really only mention Bianca, Wavebird, and Loki, there are also Emily, Stephanie, Milky Mint, the Fourth Wall Cult, and many, many others. In showing off so many characters all at once, we don't get to know too much about the main duo, Bianca and Loki. This often left the latter to the wayside with not much to do, even when the spotlight was actually focused on them. The first run of Loki IRL stopped being worked on around 2018, which was the time it was ported onto webtoons. But moving forward, while art was drawn to the characters between 2018 and 2019, Pan felt major art block with the comics. And it wasn't until 2020 did Pan finish up the remaining issues of the first run of Loki IRL, later putting them on webtoons in January 2021. In reading the comic, while fans did like the art style, it was commented on that the formatting of the panels was very off-putting. When talking with Pan about this, the only comic he really read was Scud.
I don't read comics. I did read Scud the Disposable Assassin, and when I read that, I was like, huh, this comic just gets right to the point. I gotta get right to the point. Yeah.
Upon hearing that, I had to get up from my chair just to go pet my cats before returning just to finish this video. It is a lie I made up just to show footage of my cats, Bear and Marvel. Hope you liked it. This could be why the formatting of his comics weren't really up to stuff at the time, as he basically just read one comic. For these sorts of productions, be it comics, animation, or any art really, it's good to get inspired by many works within and outside the medium you work in, as to widen your skill set. And to start with expanding his skills, Pan opted to try and pitch his idea, not to a major network privately behind the scenes, but rather to Adult Swim on their former pitch streams. In 2020, aiming to learn what he can to improve, relays an infamous livestream that revealed a lot of holes within his production. So let's see how that turned out. Just like you can turn up and like and subscribe to the video if you like it so far. Thank you. With this being the first time Pan has ever pitched something, a thing or two would of course end up going wrong. He tried wearing headphones, but the call program wasn't picking them up, and so the laptop's mic was often picking up the sound of the interviewers, as well as the fact his laptop was actually on his lap, meaning that the camera was moving here and there, a lot. Also, as an aside, this wasn't a Discord call. It was like some sort of video call service he wasn't familiar with, so there wasn't really time to check things, I guess. It wasn't even Skype. On top of that, he was naturally nervous, as animation legend Genny Tarnofsky and producer Mike Lazo were on the call. The former created Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, and recently, Primal. The latter produced shows like Aqua Team Hunger Force, Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law, and even the Powerpuff Girls. So to say there wasn't pressure would be a massive understatement. In preparation for the call, Pan created a pitch document in order to better convey the story. For positives, he had some nice visuals of text describing the characters. He even compared the show's premise to modern day ones, which is a good thing to do as it gives a frame of reference to the people you're pitching to. Nice job. Though the major part that didn't translate well was what a typical episode would be. Besides the initial idea, Pan wasn't really able to describe other scenarios of the characters. And on top of that, there wasn't much about the motivation for said main characters. What are their wants? What are the needs for the series? And this is very important for a serialized production, because they have to have like an arc. The biggest thing on top of all that was that he was spending too much time talking about the world rather than the characters themselves. Gendy said,
"It's like if you're pitching Finding Nemo and you go, it's about the ocean."
As quickly as the call began, it had ended, but even if he might have been embarrassed at the time, does Pan regret it? No.
Because I was just like, because for the longest time, I always wanted to pitch something, and it's like, I never got that chance or opportunity, and this was the one time I did it, and it was in front of Gendy Tartakovsky, and it's like, yeah, I know I did horrible, but it's like, it's my first time. It's like, you expect me to be good on my first time? Joke's on you. I can't do that.
Also to note, these Adult Swim pitch streams aren't really to get a show, as they're more so learning opportunities for young creators to try and prove their crafts. Though if you want to get on them now to try and pitch something, they kind of stopped doing that livestream stuff after the recent merger, so I'd say Pan was extra lucky to get his show in. And after the livestream ended, he was motivated to release his revamped comic. This would be what he was pitching for the Adult Swim livestream, so not the previous Loki IRL comic, but the rebooted one that he was working on. While the story still follows Bianca and Loki, this is a soft reboot, meaning the prior series is canon, somewhat but not really, as he puts it. Think of the 2003 and 2008 Hulk movies. Are they part of the MCU canon? Sure, some of it, just don't think about it. Some of the major changes start with the first issue, as it's not an origin story, rather just the day in the life sort of deal. Another part was that Bianca, once a tuned human hybrid, was now fully human. And I'm mentioning that now as it really didn't come up in the first run of the series. The fact of humans in cartoons doing it within his comic was actually a memorable moment from the live stream, where Pan jokingly mentions it, citing Cool World.
I mean, if you could live in a world where you can bone cartoon characters, wouldn't you do it?
I mean, we'll talk about that. How does that work? I mean, just anybody who wants to procreate in this world is just welcome to, or how do you see that? Okay.
Also, Monique McDuffie, once a fully tuned side character, was now a fully human main antagonist. Co-antagonists, Cindy and Katrina, are more focused on within this reboot as well, and the ink meter, the thing in which lets these IRLs come to life, is now a main staple visually. Like right there. But story-wise, there's still some major pitfalls, one including focusing too much on fighting, and Loki again not having really much to do. Citing again a lot of characters just for the first issue. Actually, I think there might be more this time, actually. While reception of the soft reboot is fairly good, he still felt that something was missing when making a webcomic.
Well, I don't know, just music, you know? Just like, can't get the voice sound of it. It's like, you just don't hear it, you know? It just doesn't have the same oomph that it's just not a sound medium, you know?
It is a very imagine the voice in your head medium.
Yeah.
So after a small break and a lot of thinking, Pan opted to focus his efforts on making an animated pilot instead. That's the turnaround.
Sometimes you just gotta say, F it. This doesn't make any sense, so kill your darlings. Take them to a gas station, put them out back, just like that scene in Fight Club, just put a gun to their head, just like, yeah, motherfucker, I'm tired of your dumb bullshit, you stupid.
It's like every time I do a new section, there's more cat hair on the sweatshirt, so don't pay attention to that. Creating a pilot is vastly different from making a webcomic. For the ones with story and lore, they often either go on indefinitely or just end up never getting finished for one reason or another, much to the dismay of someone who finds a series long after the creator stops working on it. Which now's a good time for a frame of reference for Pan Pizza and his series. Pan was about 21 when first officially working on Loki IRL, with his first comic releasing when he was 23. And with him at 29 now, and using what he had learned from talking to show creators, he opted to make an animated pilot. To work in a medium he's more knowledgeable in and comfortable with is a good benefit. Part of the medium switch has to do with how he felt about creating webcomics as a whole.
Whenever somebody asked me on the podcast about it or whatever, or got a question on Tumblr, I always felt like a bit ashamed because there was always a lag where making a comic took so long that by the time I finished one comic, I was like, well, I know much more than I did before. What I made now just isn't so great. So it's like, well, better luck next time. And it's always a better luck next time because each issue is radically better than the last one.
This was an internal fear that Pan was slowly able to overcome while making this pilot. May 2nd, 2021, Pan publicly talks about the pilot on Twitter, with steady progress being made. It is worth mentioning that at this point in time, Pan works on videos mainly by himself, opting to edit and all that jazz, meaning his time is split between creating content and animating this project. Further describing on Twitter how he felt like he was in a repetitive rut with his life, and animating this pilot has been really lifting himself up. Updates about the pilots are few and far between, though the public was interested. Pan noted that a lot of people offered to do voices for the project, but at the time, he was still ironing out the details.
It's tough to write a script where it's like, just to create a finalized thing. And one thing I struggled with was giving like Loki something to do, because this was mostly Bianca's story, but I was like, I need to get Loki to have a little bit of an arc or something here. So yeah, that was tough because I don't know. I feel like the comics in general, it's like Loki never had as much development as Bianca would.
Curious about the project and how it was going, I spoke with him about it in September 2021. Much like his foray into pitching, creating a pilot was also his first time creating a full-fledged animation. So during this process, we opted to work together on each other's respective ideas. As we found out when talking to each other, we needed help to move our projects forward. As let me tell you, we both needed it.
It was September 25th when I first read your script.
Yeah, and was it amazing?
It was very interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
At the start, his story was written in Notepad on his MacBook, and when put into Google Docs for a temporary transplant, it was 35 pages long. As a frame of reference, a standard script is about 1 minute per page, give or take action or dialogue being trimmed or edited up, down, left, and right in post. And if created with no edits, it would actually be longer than the Hazbin Hotel pilot, which ran at 31 minutes and 46 seconds. So it needed to be trimmed down a bit. This was mainly to let the cartoon not feel too bloated, but to also save a lot of time and money on the first project. Between late September and November 22nd, the script was extensively worked on and edited. I studied up on his previous comics to get a feel for the lore and direction, and we both had rules when working on this pilot. Number 1, it cannot be an origin story. Number 2, canon can be changed for the series. Number 3, don't be afraid to trim. Number 4, villains cannot be fully villains. There gotta be some good in them. And lastly, number 5, focus more on the dialogue than the action. I very much dislike origin story pilots, as it doesn't really give you a feel of the story yet to come. Not knowing how the characters would interact normally gives a lot of expectations from the fans that might not live up to their personal hype. This is why I prefer Hell of a Boss to Hazbin Hotel's pilot, as it focuses on the everyday rather than the first day. An origin story can always be explained later, also as to not overload the audience with too much info at once. Speaking of, canon needed to be changed for a lot of reasons. When looking into how the world is structured, I didn't really get a lot of the base elements. This mainly focuses on why cartoons are still being animated when IRLs exist, how a drawing can have memories, and even basic government stuff, as an IRL is essentially a weapon, an alive weapon. So we mainly opted to simplify. One of the major changes was the introduction to IRLs. Rather than being something that always existed, we opted to make them a more recent phenomenon. In doing so, we can have the underlying ideas about creation and what makes an artist. The ink itself is also focused on within our talks, not much how it's made because it's magic, but rather who discovered it and how it was found to be used to create IRLs. But oddly enough, in having users with unique fighters within our story, neither Pan or I actually saw JoJo's Bizarre Adventure when writing the concept. Something when Faux pitching this concept to friends came up in conversation. Though I did later watch Stone Ocean and found the comparisons are surface level. Noting of course that no one can see the fighters or stands in JoJo, and in Loki IRL you design your own characters, so it's really just a funny coincidence that we nearly made another JoJo. Another part of the scripting process was figuring out Bianca and Loki's motivation. This was something touched upon by Gendy within the livestream. In original canon, Bianca was in high school as a toon-human hybrid, wanting to have a cartoon. So to give more urgency to the characters, Bianca is aged up, 18, and out of high school in a gap year. Taking place in this time is pivotal, as Bianca needs to choose whether she wants to get a job or try to go to college. But either way in the end, still wanting to have her own cartoon. Loki's motivation is more complicated due to him being an IRL. He's still a never pitched pilot as per the previous canon, but because Bianca brought him to life, he's more so copy the character rather than the original. Thinking about what aspects about him are really him, and if he wants to be known for his past, while also helping Bianca achieve her future. Them being bound together by a curse. Now, with proper underlying motivation, the pilot was trimmed down from 35 to 23 pages. And though that might not seem like a lot, there were many things cut. Entire scenes of new places, people and things that ended up going nowhere had to be left out. Pan jokingly lamented this on Twitter, but in the end, the pilot script came out a lot more concise. And remembering, of course, you can always use those ideas in future episodes, there's always another time. Also, as an aside, we did put the story in a proper scriptwriting program, Celtex, so it's more accurate and formatting for the actors to read. Though he aims to mostly animate by himself, he has hired a background artist as well as many voice actors to practice working as a team leader. Of course, while we talked about the world and motivation for the characters, I didn't want to spoil specifics for the cartoon's release. So talking with Pan, I'll just say the logline for the upcoming animation. After constant losses and viral humiliation, Bianca and her drawn-to-life character Loki want to prove themselves by challenging internet star Monique to an art battle. What an exciting premise, I can't wait to see. And on the flip side, which I hope to catch you on, since I mentioned prior that he helped on my project, and to make a long story short, we completely reworked the world and character motivation like in his cartoon, ending up with 10 major revisions to the script and 7 major revisions to the art style. But learning from this, if it's not evident, finding the right writing partner can uplift and even make your work better. But with our productions aiming to release in 2022, I spoke with Pan about future outcomes to consider with writing his series. So strap in, as we're about to talk about the scary heres and theres of creating a series. During the pilot's pre-production phase, I assisted in the writing, as well as the audition/recording sessions for the characters, just like I assisted myself to his cartoon taxi when he went to get snacks at the gas station. But now I'm trapped in here for the section. Help. And so I also talked with him about future outcomes and possibilities you have to consider and endure respectively. And there are two major paths you have to consider if you want to continue the series. That being self-funding the project or pitching to a network. These two major paths focus on the idea that you want to continue the series. As opposed to webcomics that go on forever as mentioned before, most often you'll see a cartoon pilot usually just be the one and done thing for whatever reason. Though there are some exceptions. And so with that, we're going with a positive future for the video, that a season is intended. And on the path to self-funding, there are two directly separate examples with Hell of a Boss and Monster Lab respectively. One being funded mainly by merch sales, views, and Patreon, with the latter being Kickstarter backed. Both cases have their ups and downs. As for Hell of a Boss, with no direct schedule, the production team has more time to work on the show. Though in saying that, the fans have to be left in the dark for the most part, while the series is being worked on. Though if there are major mistakes, those are pointed out more often, as there's no specific release date. For Monster Lab being kickstarted and having a formal schedule, the audience does know when the show will release episode by episode. Though this is at the expense of the crew doing their best to get the series out in time, with mistakes more likely to happen with this sort of scheduling, and there's always a chance of missing a deadline. Either way, having some sort of plan laid out for your series is important, as it lets your audience know what you're going for. This is more recommended after you get a feel of how your production team works, and try your best not to overpromise. At the end of the day, having these concrete ideas and plans was a major hurdle for Pan to overcome. When talking with him about his original comic series, there really wasn't much of a plan, as it was just made up along the way.
So did you have some sort of ending in mind for the original canon?
I pretty much, yeah, I did have one, yeah. But it took so long to make this comic and to draw everything that it's just like, damn, that's so far away. And the old comics were just never focused. It was just a mess of every idea I thought was vaguely funny. Yeah.
With these original characters that he's had for nearly 2 decades, he wanted to make sure he was giving them a proper story, so he might have felt that he wasn't doing what he could to achieve that, remembering back to the break in 2018 and restructuring in late 2020. This is why for the pilot, a lot of work was put into rebuilding the world from the ground up and giving the characters more depth. I mean, they're still gonna be 2D, but you know what I mean. We even written out options for a 6 to 8 episode first season, but a lot of it boils down to reception and if the audience wants to see more of these characters. Also for how much you'd want to ask if aiming for a Kickstarter, which is why we opted for a variable first season of episodes. On the other major path is pitching, with the concept of having your show on television, though this is the most double-edged sword one can have, especially for someone like Pan and his OCs. There are many steps between pitching and production, with a lot of ways the cartoon can fail even before it sees the first episode air. There could be a network merger which cancels the cartoon, when the executives might be switched out, and want to have a new show instead of yours, or even the idea changes so much it isn't even your cartoon anymore. And unless you're a wizard of negotiations, at the end of the day, you most likely won't be able to own those characters, so if you intend on writing mixed universes, that becomes an issue. For the case of Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss, because one is a network production and the other one isn't, the likelihood of these characters officially or directly appearing in the other is next to none. But an upside to having your own cartoon on a network includes access to, often, more money for production. You get to see your cartoon on streaming services, and promote it on the networks you once watched as a kid. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a Blu-ray of it. Actually, wait, in the Monster Lab Kickstarter, he was also giving out Blu-rays? But you get my point. Or even the possibility that your character could appear with other famous cartoons, much like OKKO, hanging out with Captain Planet, and Sonic. But this isn't to say you can't pitch with keeping your character's copyright in mind, as with Zach Hadel and Chris O'Neill's cartoon. During the pitching phase, a major stipulation was that they owned the characters after the show was over, though they couldn't find a buyer and the show was never created. Zach Hadel, along with Michael Cusack, were able to get the show Smiling Friends picked up for a season, and Chris O'Neill ventured off into the world of Let's Plays, even working on his game, Bobo, which I can't wait to play. While these future concerns are there, that doesn't stop Pan from continuing his idea. Learning a lot animating by himself within Premiere Pro, though I did suggest After Effects, cause I like animating that program. The process has been coming along nicely, and expected to release sometime in 2022, I look forward to how it turns out. From a nearly decade-old comic to a pilot with a lot of potential, fans are eagerly waiting to see what Pan has to bring to the table. Sometimes all you need to do is take a chance and try something new, and with those of you watching, I hope you take some inspiration from this to try and do something with your old OCs. and I look forward to what everyone has to create. Now, how do I get out of here?
Do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to say for this interview?
Is you think Gendy will see my pilot?
Yeah?
Oh.
Sometimes on a project, all you need is someone to help you out and get it moving along, and to find the right person you mesh with will help in the long run. For the early beginnings of the drawings Pan made in high school, to the pilots made for 2022, this would be one cartoon I can't wait to see be brought to life. Just as much as I appreciated his help and guidance with my own cartoon. Also, if you're watching the video after the cartoon's release, please tell me what you think of it in the comments below. Thank you to Pan Pizza for letting me interview him for the video. I know it was a bit hard to come out of your shell when talking about your characters. Special thank you to my patrons on screen, and you can see them right now. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter, join Ellis Marks and I's Discord, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, please, don't forget to have a good day. I mean, I wanted to end 2021 in like a good note. Some people keep saying, what do you always cut off? Like when you're saying the thing at the end.